All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Jody Janikopoulos. I'm an Adult Services Associate at Addison Public Library. I am so very pleased to welcome back to our YouTube channel as well as our live stream on Zoom, Sandy Kurby. She is from College of DuPage. I found her through the Speakers Bureau, which is a terrific resource, and I do so enjoy inviting people for their professional offerings. And I was lucky to have Sandy. We had her for eating healthy for mental clarity and longevity back in April. That is a recording that is stored also on our YouTube channel. But at the time of the program, was introduced to the possibility of having this kind of program with Sandy. So I said, absolutely, let's do it. And here we are with eating healthy at restaurants, work, and home. It's a topic that I think we all know well with our sort of to-go food life, as well as being able to go back into restaurants. So I think that it is to our advantage to get some tips and tricks while we can. And good morning, Sandy, and welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. I think that it is a pretty important and good topic to be discussing now, whether you have kids that might be going back to school and starting to think about planning lunches, maybe for yourself if you have to go back into work, trying to manage, planning things like that. Or even if you are, either retired or still at home or working from home, just having some sort of routine, I think, is very helpful. So we'll touch a little bit on that. We'll also talk about, yes, the return to restaurant dining and maybe some choices that we can choose that are a little bit better than others that maybe in the past we wouldn't have thought twice about, but now taking this little pause that we have for a little while, maybe we have reconsidered some things for our health and want to make some better choices. So we'll be talking about that. And then, of course, fast food, because there's always times where you do have to, hit a drive-through or, get something quick. And so what are some of our better options, or how can we best plan ahead in terms of what we might be able to choose that would be a little bit better or make us satiated a little bit longer instead of just grabbing, some French fries and calling it a day because, it's fast food and you don't want to have it, but then you have a blood sugar spike and then drop and you're back in the same boat an hour later. So hopefully we can answer some of those questions. And if there's anything as we go along, again, feel free to put it either in the chat. Feel free to unmute and just ask if you want as well. I'm fairly open to that as long as we don't have people, yelling over each other, which I doubt we'll have. But otherwise, I'm ready to go if everybody else is.
Great. Thank you, Sandy.
Yeah, thank you. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we will jump right into the PowerPoint that I put together. This is just a guide. Again, if there's anything that you want to talk about a little bit more in depth, feel free to ask away as we're going along here. So again, my name is Sandy Kurby. I work at College of DuPage. I was there in the summer as well, but moving back into fall, I think I'm in a similar situation as a lot of people with trying to get back into the swing of things again. I do have my master's of public health and I'm a registered and licensed dietitian. So that's a little bit of background about me. Again, the things that we're going to touch on, bringing food into work, school, whatever it may be, some of our better choices for restaurant dining, some places, we'll talk about fast food, and then we'll also talk about maybe some ethnic dining, like if you're going to an Italian restaurant or a Greek restaurant. Sometimes we focus so much on fast food dining, but maybe you're one of those that says, I don't really go to McDonald's that often or anything like that, but I do go to, the local Italian, place because it's, a nice fine dining experience. And when I go out, that's what I want to do. So what are choices that I can make that are healthier there? So we'll discuss that a little bit as well. The main thing, which kind of falls into anything when it comes to nutrition, exercise, wellness, is planning ahead. I know a lot of people don't want to hear that part of it, but the more you can plan ahead and give yourself that head start of where you're going, what options you have in terms of eating, or if you're eating at home, what are your options there? Planning a list before you go grocery shopping, things like that are really going to be helpful. So if you can even, come up with a meal plan for the week before you make your grocery list, then you can look through your refrigerator, see what you have, look in the pantry, see what you have there. You can, then make your grocery list from the items that you might have. And then when you go to the grocery store, you're not over buying. And we can touch on some grocery tips a little bit later on as well, but you're not going to be over buying and you're not going to be impulse buying as well. So kind of sticking to a plan is definitely going to be helpful. Planning can also give us a good variety of nutritious foods. So if you notice, you're eating the same thing day in, day out, maybe you went to the doctor and your cholesterol is a little bit high. So you're trying to increase a little bit more fiber in your diet, or maybe, you are concentrating a little bit more on just adding more fruits and vegetables into your diet. Whatever your nutrition goals may be, you can look down at your meal plan and you can say, all right, I've been eating the same things pretty much every day, or we're moving into fall. It's apple picking season. Maybe I can add some apples in. Maybe I can, start looking at, seasonal stuff, what might be best to add into your diet that way. So the more variety we have, the better. And then I've always say, if you look down at your plate, the more colorful, the better. If you look down at your plate and you have like white, yellow, and that's about it, you can't really tell if there's really a color or if it's really just blending into the plate. You might want to try adding some of those leafy greens in, some beans, some, just little pops of color. It'll look a little bit more appetizing as well, but you'll be getting a little bit more variety in terms of your nutrition. In terms of if you are going to be dining out and you know that ahead of time, let's say tomorrow's Friday night, and I know I'm going out to celebrate somebody's birthday. I know where we're going to be going, and I know I'm going to indulge. That's perfectly fine. Try to have several smaller meals throughout the day, so that you don't show up to that dinner, or as we get into the holiday season, maybe parties, whatever it may be, just famished, because then you're going to start eating, whatever is going to be served in front of you. When we look at restaurant dining, sometimes you'll see the chips there. Sometimes there's bread, little things like that are brought to you before you actually get your meal. And I know myself included, sometimes if you go in too hungry, you start eating all of that. And then by the time your meal actually comes, if you really did it like a scale of 1 to 5, how hungry am I? You probably wouldn't be, 5, I'm, famished and, gonna fall over because I haven't had anything to eat. A lot of times we're actually kind of full because we've been eating or filling up on all these things that are brought to us. So having those smaller meals throughout the day is definitely gonna be helpful. Also knowing where you're gonna be going, so that with those smaller meals throughout the day, let's say we're going out for pizza, and I know I'm not gonna have a salad because it's a birthday party and or birthday dinner, and I know that they wanted to go to Luminati's, we'll say, and we're not going to have a salad. We're just having a couple of pieces of really good pizza, and maybe a beer or wine or something like that. And I know that's pretty much going to be my dinner, but it's going to be high calories because I've got all that cheese on there. Maybe I'm having something with some meats, whatever it may be. Yes, go ahead and indulge. But then earlier in the day, all right, maybe for lunch, I can have like a spinach salad and throw some extra fruit in there, or breakfast, pay a little bit more attention to what I'm having there and adding some extra fruits in. So little things like that where you can actually kind of plan throughout your day for the meal that you're going to be having later on. Where are you eating? A lot of times you can find things online, online menus. So we'll go through a little bit, as I said, we'll do some fast food dining, and then we're also going to be talking a little bit more about like sit down dining, some of our ethnic meals. And if you can look online and know ahead of time, sometimes you don't have to worry about when you get to the restaurant and you're catching up with somebody, you don't have to worry about like being rushed and going through the menu and the waiter has come back like 3 times now asking if you're ready to order. You kind of already have an idea, maybe it's between 1 or 2 things. So you have an idea ahead of time, but you can also plan the rest of your day before then. So sometimes knowing where you're going, and if you have the opportunity, I always like to tell people, be the one to say where you want to go, because then you're more in control of finding a place that might have some healthier options. With that, some people think that salads are always going to be the healthiest option. That is definitely not true. Unfortunately, salads, yes, in general, dark leafy greens, vegetables, all that, fantastic for us. However, when we look at dining out, a lot of times there's hidden things in there, like extra cheese, usually copious amounts of meat, especially if you're doing like a chopped salad, not to place name, but Portillo's, their chopped salad. A lot of people say like, oh, we're going to Portillo's for, lunch with work. I'm just going to have the chopped salad because I'm, kind of watching things. That's actually probably worse than getting a beef sandwich. The dressing, the meat, the cheese, all of that adds up really quickly. So knowing that ahead of time and knowing what some of those added extras are that can, be a little bit more detrimental to your calorie goals will definitely help in the future. So again, planning ahead is always going to be something that you want to take a look at. In terms of brown bag lunching, so we're going to start with if you can take something either to work, to school, wherever it may be, even if you're going out for a long bike ride and having a picnic somewhere, if you can take something with you, all the better. So if you can, you want to make it quick. You want to make it as convenient as possible because a lot of times, again, if you can plan things ahead of time, and so you just open up the refrigerator and have a grab and go, all the better. So if you can find things that are individually packaged, or what I really like to recommend, because it'll be a little bit fresher, is when you come home from the grocery store, let's say you have a cantaloupe or a watermelon or whatever it may be, take that, cut everything up and put them in individual containers to begin with. So whether they're little baggies or if it's a little like Rubbermaid containers so that you can, easily take that out of the refrigerator and you've got your portion already set and ready to go. So individual packs, some that are already like that are store-bought would be yogurts, puddings. Sometimes you can find soup cups, popcorn, pretzels. Something to kind of keep in mind is with our pre-packaged food items, sodium can be really high. So if you do have high blood pressure or if sodium is something that you are kind of watching, I would be a little bit mindful of the portions with that and how much sodium you are finding with that. Again, pre-washed and pre-cut vegetables and fruit. If you don't want to take the time when you come home from the grocery store to wash everything and cut it up and make those individual packages for yourself, you can buy some things that are already pre-washed and pre-cut. And then again, it's a little bit easier to grab and go. There's also the pre-assembled pasta and grain salads. A lot of times you can find these by the deli section and they'll have them already pre-packaged and ready to go. Again, this is an area where when we'll talk a little bit about grocery shopping in itself. If you have the time, maybe in the beginning, I always say baby steps. So if you're going to start off just menu planning for the week and then trying to, make that variety in your meals for each week, you're making some things ahead of time and then you're ready to grab and go for your brown bag lunches. Great. If you want to take it a step further, again, instead of buying the individual packs of things, making things ahead of time. So you don't even have to buy, pre-packaged puddings. You can buy, one, bigger serving of pudding that makes, 4 cups, and you can make that and put them into your own individual things. Same thing with soups. You can make your own soup ahead of time. So if you do have the time making things on your own ahead of time, especially when it comes to, again, those pastas and grain salads, things you might find at the deli counter, again, a preservative is sodium and oftentimes sugar as well. So those are our 2 main preservatives. So if you can make something fresher, more often than not, you won't have to have those preservatives in there as well. And then a last note is to just make it fun. So pack a variety is the spice of life. So trying to, make things as fun and interesting as possible, not doing the same exact lunch every single day. Or if it's a breakfast that you grab and go and maybe you're even eating in the car, trying to vary it as much as possible. And again, use a variety of colors whenever you can. So especially if you're doing like a brown bag lunch, if you open it up and all you see is white bread with turkey and cheese. So maybe we have a little bit of an orangey yellow going on there. Then you have potato chips. You have pretty much all that same white yellowish color. Not going to be the best. So trying to add some of those greens in there, maybe a pop of red with some tomatoes, or even, again, like if you have a pasta or a grain salad, adding some veggies in with that as well. So the more colorful you can get, the more you know you're going to be getting more nutritional bang for your buck. So again, keeping things varied, just some ideas kind of going through all of our food groups here. I just like to offer some options because sometimes people will say, well, if I'm doing a brown bag of lunch, basically that means my turkey sandwich and again, a bag of chips and maybe an apple. So the apple is going to be my like healthiest thing in my lunch. Doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So for grains, you can try a pita pocket instead of bread, or a tortilla, making a wrap. Again, grain salads, such as like a couscous salad or a quinoa salad, you can really get a good variety of vegetables, beans, things like that added in when you do something like a salad, a wrap, or even a pita pocket. A pita can really hold quite a bit as long as you don't have dressing or something that's going to leak out the bottom or soften it. A lot of times those are great options aside from having your standard just, sandwich bread. For fruits, again, trying to do things as seasonal as possible. It'll be better tasting. So, if you have an apple, now or next month versus when you had an apple maybe in, March, there's a pretty good taste difference between the two. So if you can, even buying local, definitely has a really good taste to it when you can buy things that are in season. I always say occasionally try exotic fruits or maybe something that's new to you. So there's a lot of like Fresh Marts that are open now. Even some places like Jewel or Mariano's, places like that, will have a variety of different types of fruits and vegetables that maybe you've never had before. So I especially enjoy doing this with my kids when they were younger. I would take them grocery shopping with me and I would bring them to the produce section and I would say, I want you to find something that you have no idea what it is. And we're going to take it home and we'll figure it out. So that was actually the first time I ever had star fruit, was because one of my kids had picked it up and didn't know what it was. We looked at the label, it said star fruit. I'm like, oh yeah, I've heard of it. I've never had it before. Never knew that where I could actually even find it. Brought it home, looked up online a little bit of like how to prepare it or what you should eat or not eat. Like, should you eat the skin? Can you eat the seeds? Things like that. And really it turned into a great thing. Each time we went to the store and we would just buy one, we wouldn't, overbuy just in case we didn't like it or, something like that. But it's a good way to kind of vary your diet as well. So if you can, it doesn't have to be every single time, but maybe, once a month or seasonally, try and pick up an item or two that you may not have had in the past and see what you can do with it. In terms of vegetables, again, if you can try some vegetable soups or salad as a main dish, that's definitely going to be a great way to get those vegetables in. If you can make them yourself, again, all the better because you won't have to have as much sodium as something that might be prepackaged. So if you can, if you're looking at your grains for like a pita sandwich or something like that, you can add some vegetables to that if you already have them, cut up and ready to go. Even if you had, the night before you had some stir fry, throw maybe some leftovers in there, and then you can add a little bit of a dressing kind of thing, and you have a nice sandwich that way. Again, if you have chicken or tuna salads, or even just your standard, turkey sandwich or whatever it may be, adding some of those vegetables on can definitely, add a little bit of a boost to maybe what you were doing in the past. So in terms of calorie content, our vegetables are usually really low in calories, and usually we're not going to have a full serving going into our sandwich anyways. You're not going to have an entire tomato or a full cup of spinach going on top of your sandwich. So we're just adding a little bit going into some of those sandwiches to just kind of, increase our nutritional value a little bit there. In terms of our dairy, again, there's alternative dairy products as well, like, almond milk, cashew milk, soy milk, stuff like that. But in terms of dairy in itself, just trying to alternate what types of dairy products you're using. When we look a little bit later on at Choose My Plate, if you ever want to go to choosemyplate.org, it'll have the plate instead of the food guide pyramid. We now have a plate, and it's called Choose My Plate. And you can take a look and see that half your plate should be fruits and vegetables. And then we have a section for our protein. Well, off to the side is a cup, and that's where our dairy is. And the biggest issue that I have with that is it kind of implies that you should always have milk as your dairy. Not necessarily the case. So you can have milk if that is something that you enjoy, but there's also yogurt, low-fat cheese, a lot of variety of things that you can do to vary up your dairy. So kind of thinking about some of those different items, packing those along as well, and you can see where you get with that. So again, trying to add as much variety as possible. When it comes to meat, we want to try, and especially if we're looking at lunchtime, try to limit a little bit more of how much meat we're taking in. For the most part, a lot of people will say, well, where am I going to get my protein from? You can get a lot of protein from your dark leafy greens, from beans. If you have like a hummus spread or something like that, you can get some good protein that way. Even if you have some nuts or nut butters that you're utilizing, those are great ways to add protein. So a lot of times people really overconsume their meats. So if you are going to be using some meats, again, making sure you're not having a turkey sandwich every single day, day in and day out, but try and think of some other alternatives. So again, we can get some protein from some of our dairy products, beans, nut spreads, hummus, tofu, things like that. So again, just trying to add as much variety as possible. And then just a last note, this is the dietitian in me, just trying to make sure you keep cold foods cold and hot foods hot. So if you are going to be bringing something somewhere with you, especially if it's a warm day like today, make sure that you use like an ice pack or a gel pack to keep the foods that are supposed to be cold. If you have, let's say, yogurt in there or something like that, you are keeping them cold. And then any hot foods, if you have a thermos or something like that, you can use so that your hot foods do stay warm. So 40 to 140 is going to be your danger zone that you don't want to have your foods in for too long of a time. So again, just keep hot foods hot and cold foods cold, and you should be good. Looking at expiration dates, just making sure, and we'll talk about this a little bit later on when we talk about groceries items as well, but just looking at expiration dates. So where do you have things in your refrigerator? Maybe now before, before Monday comes over the weekend, you can start like with a clean slate, go through the refrigerator, look for expiration dates. Sometimes you find things that have expired a really long time ago that you're like, oh, I didn't even know that I had this teriyaki sauce, just hanging in the refrigerator, little things like that. So just take a little look at some of our expiration dates, especially as we're maybe getting back into trying to add a little bit more variety, and maybe you picked up an item that you didn't use as much as you thought you would have. Maybe it's expired by now. So just kind of take a look at the expiration dates. When we're using our foods to prepare to make these meals, just make sure that the surfaces that you're working with are clean surfaces. Separate raw foods from cooked foods. So if you are doing anything with raw foods, if you can do your fruits and vegetables, cut and do all that stuff first, then you can work on the meat. That way you don't have to worry about cross-contamination that way. So, or keep them completely separate to begin with, where you have a different cutting board and that whole thing. So again, just trying to make sure that we have that food safety in mind. Scrubbing and rinsing produce, there's lots of different rinses that you can get for produce as well, but at least just making sure that you are rinsing things. If you have a little brush, to put a little bit of elbow grease kind of in there as well, just to take off some of those pesticides and things like that will definitely be helpful. Heating cooked foods sufficiently to kill germs. So again, your hot foods, usually above 140, for meats over 165. And then your perishable foods, anything that needs to be refrigerated, making sure it gets to the refrigerator on time. So I'm not going to continue on about the keeping hot foods hot and cold foods cold, but just so you know, again, you don't want to have any foodborne illnesses because things have been left out a little too long. So moving into fast food, going through drive-thrus, things like that. Where should we go? Where should we avoid? I always say balance is the spice of life. So, I'm not going to tell you if again, going back to, that Portillo's chopped salad, if that's your favorite thing, I'm not going to tell you that you should never have that again. But just making sure that if you do know that you are going to be having to go out for fast food at some point, just trying to make your meals as well balanced as possible. Ordering smaller portions and lower fat items can definitely be helpful, especially with the portion sizes. As time has gone on, from 20, 30 years ago even, we used to have smaller portion sizes compared to what they are today. So we'll see that in the next slide, how things have kind of shifted over the years. So there used to be this Super Size Me, if you remember or have seen the movie Super Size Me, the documentary. They used to ask at McDonald's if you can supersize your order to make it a bigger portion. Now they don't supersize anymore, but their portions have just naturally gotten bigger because of that. So just being mindful of that, going with the smaller portions. If you really are hungry after you've had that, then sure, go back and order something else. Requesting no special sauces. A lot of times if there's a special sauce or something that you don't quite know what the ingredients are in it, or like a Big Mac, the special sauce that's on there, a lot of times it means that there's going to be something that's very high fat in there, and something that we want to avoid a little bit more. We do see the calorie content when we go to a lot of fast food places now, so that is definitely a helpful tool to utilize. It used to be that you would just have the nutrition facts all the way in the back by the restrooms, or when you're dumping your tray out or something like that. But now a lot of restaurants do have, fast food places, I should say, do have that nutrition information more available to you, and they have the calorie content listed on their menu as well. So that's a good guide if you're ever in a crunch and not sure exactly what to be choosing. I like to tell people to be wise with fast food salad bars. I know Wendy's has a salad bar or a potato bar. Just knowing that the more cheese that you're adding on, sour cream, things like that, the higher fat you're going to be getting in there as well. So maybe adding on a little bit more broccoli, a little less cheese, you'll be in a better place. High fat breakfast items. Some people like to hit the drive-through in the morning. That's their time. They're like, I really don't go for lunch or dinner, but I hit Dunkin' Donuts every single morning, or I hit Starbucks every single morning, and I just pick up a coffee and then something small. Well, that something small might mean a lot more than what you think. So knowing is half the battle. So if you can, take a look at some of those menu items, take a look at the nutrition facts, and just know what you're getting. So a lot of times I do tell people, if there's a place that you frequent, again, if you can look online, you can find the nutrition information there. But if you are stopping at these places frequently, pick up their nutrition facts. They should have some printed out somewhere. Or again, you can always look online. But I have made for myself, and I usually keep by my telephone or in my glove compartment if there's something that I know that we're going to frequent because we have to hit soccer between this time and this time, and I'm running somebody else somewhere else. I'll keep a couple of pamphlets of, Subway or whatever it is, so that I can open up and see right away, okay, this is, what that means. The tuna salad is probably one of the worst there. So maybe I'll do, something else, and I'll add some vegetables on there as well. So just making sure that you know what you're getting, and instead of just thinking this is probably a good thing and you're not quite sure. So again, knowing is half the battle there. With those high fat breakfast items or high calorie breakfast items, again, some people will say, well, I just get a cup of coffee. Well, is it just a cup of coffee? Are you putting something else in there? Is it more of a frappuccino or a latte where they're using whole milk? Can you change it to a skim milk or something like that, where you can kind of take some of that calorie content a little bit lower? So again, kind of just being mindful of how many calories, easily some items that you can find at Dunkin', Starbucks, some of those items, even a small, can be upwards of almost 500 calories. So just having an idea, no whipped cream, things like that, having an idea ahead of time, ways that you can order can definitely be helpful. And then, of course, I think this is a no-brainer for less sugar and calories, trying to restrict some of the sweets after your meal, or any extra, steps out to Dairy Queen and things like that. So restricting milkshakes, pies, sundaes, syrups, sweet sauces. Nobody really wants to hear that. So we're not going to dwell on that too much yet. But again, just looking at portion sizes and how things have changed from about 20 years ago to where they are now. They've just increased in portion sizes, making the consumer feel like they're getting more for their money. But really, we're not taking more home, we're just consuming more. So keeping that in mind as well. So I'm going to go through a couple of restaurants in terms of fast food places, some things to choose and some things to maybe avoid a little bit more of, or maybe you just never really thought to look at the nutrition information. But hopefully this will give you a little bit of an idea of some items that might be better than others. So first off, Subway, they promote their 7 sandwiches for 6 grams of fat a piece or less. Something to keep in mind with that is that this does not include any cheese, mayonnaise, or oils. So when you hear of somebody promoting something, even if you're in the grocery store and looking at food labels themselves, we'll talk a little bit later on about, what it means to have less fat or reduced fat versus no fat and things like that. If we're looking at something that promotes to have less than 6 grams of fat, there might be an asterisk next to that. There might be something that they're just saying the sandwich itself, but nothing added on in addition to that. So when it comes to the Subway 7 sandwiches for 6 grams of fat or less, they're talking about not having any cheese on that, not having any mayonnaise, and not having any of those, the oils that they add on at the very end. Taco Bell. So one taco, again, not that everything is going to be terrible for you. Portion size is where we're going to be looking. So one Taco Bell taco, 170 calories, 10 grams of fat. Soft taco, 210 calories or 10 grams of fat. If you look at, Dorito Loco or, anytime, I'll give you a big hint here. Anytime you hear the word crunchy, extra crunchy, loco, anything like that, you're going to be getting something that has been fried first off, sometimes fried for a second time so that they get that extra crunchy. Usually extra crunchy means it's been through the fryer more than one time. So you have that bigger crunch. And then if you have anything that's extra or supreme or anything like that, a lot of times there's a lot of added components to that, whether it's a high fat additive like sour cream or cheese, again, doubling the frying time, things like that can definitely add on a little bit more. So these are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in terms of things that you might want to choose in going to some of these places. Chili's has a guiltless grill menu selection. So one of the better options you have there is going to be a chicken pita, 545 calories, 9 grams of fat. And then Burger King, again, not necessarily going for like a Whopper or anything like that, but a fire grilled shrimp salad, only 226 calories and 10 grams of fat. Now, some of the foods that we want to limit a little bit more, and I'm not saying that one place is better than another by any means. We still have something from Chili's on here. I just started kind of grabbing some things that kind of pop out a little bit more. McDonald's Big Mac, 390 calories, doesn't sound too terrible. 34 grams of fat. Again, that's going to be a little bit higher. So to give it a little bit of perspective, first off, do you just get a Big Mac on its own, or would you get a Big Mac with fries and a drink? So again, adding all that up is going to add up. What is this in comparison to what I should be eating in a typical day? The dietary guidelines are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So if you ever look at the side of a food label, like the side of a box of cereal or whatever it may be, you'll see like percentages. Those percentages are based on a 2,000 calorie diet. So that's going to be your average. There's no average person, but your average person that they're going to be looking at. So for a 2,000 calorie diet, that basically comes out to no more than 66.6 or 67, we'll say, grams of fat per day. So in this McDonald's Big Mac, just one Big Mac, no French fries, nothing else, we're already over half of our daily needs or limit for fat. So kind of keeping that in mind. Dunkin' Donuts plain croissant, 290 calories, 18 grams of fat. You might say, well, I don't really eat a whole lot, and it kind of helps me stay fuller longer because it does have that fat in there. Again, kind of looking at what you have the rest of the day can definitely be helpful there. But when you're looking at this, okay, 18 grams of fat, again, is almost a third of your fat allotment for the day. So maybe I can do something a little bit better, maybe even going to an English muffin, or maybe starting to bring something on my own, save some money that way as well. But kind of, again, just thinking of what we're picking up. When it comes to like the croissant itself, some people say like, oh, I didn't know that was really bad for you. It is a saturated fat. How to know if something is a saturated fat or not, and you're not quite sure, and you don't have access to looking something up on online or anything. If you have a napkin and you put something down like your croissant on the napkin, you walk away because you have to, do some work or check some emails. You come back and you pick up that croissant, and now your napkin has some oil all over it. That's the fat that has been so saturated in that croissant that is starting to kind of like leak out. So that is how we know that is a saturated fat. So trying to limit foods like that as much as possible. Same thing happens with chips, things like that, where that you see those little grease spots. We definitely want to avoid foods that would do that. Chili's, looking at some of the items, or an item that might be one of the worst on their menu, which often surprises people because they think, well, I'm getting my veggies in. A veggie smoked cheese quesadilla has 1,165 calories and 67 grams of fat. So that's all the fat that you need in a day if you're working on that 2,000 calorie diet. Why is that? Because of the copious amounts of cheese in there. So when you think of what a serving size is of cheese and how much cheese they actually put on those quesadillas, you're getting probably 10, 11 servings easily in that quesadilla. So even though you are getting those veggies, it doesn't quite cancel itself out. So again, keeping that in mind. Kentucky Fried Chicken, extra crispy. Again, that extra is going to mean it probably went through the deep fat fryer more than once. 470 calories and 28 grams of fat. So again, we're getting close to half of our needs for the day there. And that's just one breast. And then Panera bread, tuna salad on an artisan multigrain. A lot of times people will think, well, it's tuna, it's fish, it's healthier. It's on a multigrain bread. That's a better bread. 809 calories and 41 grams of fat. So a lot of times the tuna salad is going to be pre-made, and it has a lot of mayonnaise in there. The multigrain bread, yes, we might be getting some nuts and seeds and things like that in there, but that can also add some extra fat and calories as well. So again, looking at portions, looking at exactly what else might be in, if you're doing something that has like a salad type name to it, like tuna salad or chicken salad, what the extra additives are. So again, if you can make any of these things at home, you can control, not to say that you can't have tuna salad again, but if you can make tuna salad at home, you can control how much mayonnaise is going in there, or you can change it to a reduced fat mayonnaise. You can change the bread that you're using. So little things like that can definitely be helpful. And then going back to a slide or two ago with our desserts, Dairy Queen peanut butter parfait, just to throw some treat on here, 739 calories and 31 grams of fat. So again, we're getting close to half of our needs for the day in terms of fat. So when it comes to restaurant dining, so now we're talking a little bit more about sit-down dining. Again, shop carefully for your restaurant. So if you're going out with a group of people and people are trying to figure out where they should go, maybe you be the one to suggest the place that you want to go after you know what items a certain place or two has and offers, and you know that you can find something that'll be a little bit healthier. Again, during the day, include some snacks, include some smaller meals. Even if you're going for an early dinner, let's say you're going at 5 o'clock, you might want to make sure that you're having a snack around 3 o'clock so that you don't show up, famished and waiting for, that bread to be put down on the table so that you're, eating that as quickly as you can. Reading your selections carefully. So again, picking up on the verbiage that's being used, whether it's something that's fried versus something that's sauteed or grilled, what kind of sauces are on different things, which we'll talk about in just a minute or so. And then order wisely. So I would say, especially when you're dining out, don't ever hesitate to, and this kind of goes into the next one of don't be shy. Don't ever hesitate to ask what's in something if you're not quite sure how it was prepared or how it's going to be prepared. Don't ever hesitate to ask for something on the side, whether it's a sauce or a salad dressing, things like that. Don't ever hesitate to ask for substitution. So if you're out and you're having a burger and you decided you're going to do a black bean burger instead of the regular, quarter pounder burger, or whatever it may be, maybe it comes with fries, but you notice that they have seasonal fruit as a side that you can, order in addition. Maybe you can ask if you can substitute that for the fries. More often than not, they're going to say yes. And more often than not, there's not an upcharge for that either. So again, just don't be shy, and you're going out. So I always say, try and do something that you wouldn't cook at home, or do something for yourself at home and have somebody else go that extra mile for you, because that's what you're really paying for. When it comes to restaurant dining, I always say mind your methods. This actually should be for restaurant dining, dining at home, anything, even if you're eating in the car. But chew thoroughly and eat slowly. So a lot of times, especially with fast food dining, or if you're eating in the car because you're going from point A to point B and this is the only time you have to eat, we're stressed or whatever it may be, and we're just, shoveling food in. If you're out at a restaurant, sometimes you're in an excited conversation and, you're just eating, between, conversation. If you can, try and focus more on the conversation itself, make the dinner last a little bit longer. So put down your fork and knife, or whatever it may be between bites, give yourself that pause. If you want, even share a meal, using doggy bags. If somebody doesn't want to share a meal, when the food comes to the table, instead of waiting till the end of your meal to ask for a doggy bag or take home container, maybe ask for that when they're bringing the food out. So that way you can look down at your plate and say, all right, I'm only going to have half the amount of, let's say I'm at Maggiano's, I'm going to only have half the amount of pasta that was given to me on this plate. But I know that if I don't take this off of my plate, I'm going to sit there and keep eating because I'm involved in that conversation and I'm not really paying attention to the food that I have in front of me. So move that food off into your takeaway container so you have that for lunch or dinner the next day. And then you can sit there and enjoy the conversation and not worry about how much am I eating, or when do I need to stop, and the waiter didn't come and try and take my food yet. So now I'm just picking at it even though I'm really full. So if you have that container right away, you can eliminate the need to overeat in that capacity. Eliminate condiments. So if there's anything extra, ketchup, it's not that there's a whole lot of fat in there, but there's a lot of sugar. 1 tablespoon is usually your serving size. Some people, can dip fries and use a whole lot of ketchup, and that can add up to some calorie density quite quickly. When it comes to salads, I always tell people, especially with salads, use the fork dip food method. So with this, I tell people, get your dressing on the side. But usually when you tell people to put their dressing on the side, what happens is they pick up, let's say a piece of lettuce, and they dunk it in the dressing, and now they lift it up and it's just dripping with dressing, and they eat it. They get through like 4 or 5 pieces of lettuce and they're done with their dressing. So instead, take your fork, dip it in your dressing, and then pick up the food. And then you'll have just that little sprinkling of dressing on there. So you do have a little bit of taste, but you can taste your vegetables in your salad a little bit more as well. So again, that's fork, dip, food. Excuse me. In terms of buffets, if you are going to a place that has a buffet, I know it's very hard to avoid going up for seconds and thirds and things like that. I can tell you to try not to do that, but I know that's not going to happen. So I usually tell people the first pass or the first round, walk through and choose something that's healthy for you. You can always go up again. So kind of survey everything, because sometimes you don't see what you really wanted until the end and you already have a full plate. So wait till the next round to come up. So the first thing, maybe all you're doing is getting a nice salad. And then you see some of the other items that they have there. And then the next time you go up, then you can get something else. And by this time, hopefully you're a little bit more satiated. And then you won't be grabbing, a very large portion and that sort of thing. So again, with buffets too, look at those portion sizes. How much are you actually putting on? How many trips are you taking to go up there as well? And then desserts, anytime you can share, sharing is caring. So anytime you can share a dessert with somebody else, all the better. Of course, you can have fruit instead of ice cream and, pies and things like that. So that is an option. I know it's not always going to happen. But if you are indulging and you have the opportunity to share with somebody or split with somebody, or even for the table, all the better there. Excuse me. So in terms of breakfast choices, I have some foods to choose and foods to maybe not have as often. So I'll kind of just let you read through. I'm not going to sit here and read everything to you, but just knowing again in advance some of the items that you can be choosing versus some things that maybe you want to avoid a little bit more often. We have some of our appetizer choices. So anytime you see something that is clear in terms of like soups, so any type of broth-based soup versus a cream-based soup, it's usually going to be naturally lower in fat. Again, anytime you see something that's fried, we might want to avoid that a little bit more often. We've already talked about dressings and things like that, so I'm not going to harp on that much longer. And then in terms of entrees, this is one where some people maybe don't have as good of an understanding, except for fried is not going to be good. Battered, another way of kind of frying food or getting a coating on there, and then pan frying or breading just in general. So if something says fried, battered, or breaded, maybe not the best choice, but something that is baked. Grilled is probably going to be our best option, because if you have something that's on the grill, any fat can just drip right down. Whereas if you're, frying, you have it in the oil or fat, and that can come right back into the meat itself or whatever the food item might be. Same thing with baking and broiling. You are going to be, putting it in the oven, but if there's nothing underneath it, then some of that fat can still go back up, but it's still going to be better than something that might be fried. Anything that we have as a vegetable base versus a dairy base, so like a salsa versus like a queso, is going to be a better option. And then some of our side dishes, looking at potatoes, if you have even mashed potatoes, sometimes there can be some extra butter or some other fat that they're using. Same thing with scalloped potatoes. There's usually a lot of butter, sometimes cheese going along with that as well. So again, keeping things as vegetable-based as possible is definitely going to be helpful. And then any vegetables, if you can find them steamed, as opposed to being covered in butter or cheese or something like that, that will be a better choice as well. In terms of ethnic dining, so I'm going to jump into ethnic dining. Yes, I can email these lists. Sorry, I'm looking at the chat real quickly here. I can send an email over to Jody with the lists on there, and you can definitely get a copy of that for sure. In terms of ethnic dining, if we're looking at like a Chinese restaurant, some of the choices that you might want to have and some things to avoid. Again, stir-fried or steamed dishes are going to be better choices. If you're looking at fish, poached fish and rice, hot and sour soups, again, that's going to be more of your clear broth-based. Things to avoid, sometimes are the things that we want when we're talking about Chinese restaurants, like wontons, egg rolls, fried rice. If you can, again, if you're concerned about sodium, trying to ask if they can leave out the salt. MSG, monosodium glutamate, another derivative of salt, and then soy sauce has a high sodium content as well. If you can, try and include as many veggies as possible. So again, going for that stir fry and incorporating some extra vegetables is definitely going to be helpful. Avoid crispy fried noodles, like Cantonese noodles, things like that. Again, anything that's going to be fried is going to have that higher fat content. In terms of French dining, I don't find this as often. So maybe if you do find a really good French restaurant, maybe that's your splurge for a while. But if you are looking at some of the foods that they may offer, steamed mussels or a salad with dressing on the side is definitely going to be something that's healthier for you. Things to avoid when it comes to French cuisine, hollandaise, béarnaise, and Normandy sauces definitely contain egg, butter, and heavy cream. So if you can, try and avoid anything with those sauces on them as much as possible. That's really like the base of those sauces. So it's hard to really ask for something instead of that, or supplementing that. You know, if I can have that without the butter, doesn't quite work that way. Well, probably won't have the same effect. So if you can, look for something that might have a lighter sauce, like a wine, white wine, or a lemon juice base. That will definitely, again, you have more of that clearer look. So you know it's going to be naturally lower in fat as well. Trying to limit cheese, croissants, butter. Again, those are going to be our items that are going to be naturally higher in fat. In terms of Greek dining, if you have the option of having like pita bread and hummus or something like that, that can definitely be a great option for, especially an appetizer. Trying to avoid large amounts of butter and oil. The olives, avoiding olives, anchovies, and feta cheese. I know this is kind of like the staple of Greek dining. So again, not that you have to eliminate them, but just look at portion sizes. So know that, 5 or 6 olives, and that's probably all you really need. So not sitting down if there's, a bowl of tapenade or a bowl of just olives sitting there, that can just be an appetizer in itself. Again, looking at some of the baked fish, adding vegetables to any items you can, those are definitely going to be great options. So kebabs are really good options. Again, grilled, so any fat can naturally drip off, and you don't have to worry about that. Italian dining, depending on where you're going, I know maybe not the most finest of Italian eateries, but Olive Garden I know does offer whole wheat noodles now, so you can ask for those whole wheat noodles instead of the regular noodles. Anything that you can to increase your vegetable consumption, so whether it's adding some tomatoes to your dish, some spinach, something like that, may be helpful. Meals to avoid would be things that are stuffed with cheese, butter, creamy sauces. Again, those are going to be just higher in fat. A lot of times the portion sizes, again, especially of those cheese items, they're going to have a whole lot more than maybe you would think of as one serving going into that item. So very easy to get calories and fat content to go through the roof there. So in terms of your sauces, again, things that are a little bit lighter, looking at a marinara sauce, maybe garlic and onions and some fresh tomatoes, things like that will definitely be naturally healthier than something that would be a cream sauce like a fettuccine Alfredo or something like that. Again, trying to add vegetables in, whether it's a pasta primavera or putting vegetables on a pizza, that's going to be a great option there. And then probably one of the lower fat options that you can find on one of those menus would be on the dessert section is Italian ice. So definitely nice and refreshing. So feel free to add that in. In looking at Mexican fare, if you can try and find a place that uses whole grain tortillas or baked chips, not always going to be an option, especially if they're somebody who brings the chips directly to the table. They probably, don't have the baked chips on the side and are bringing those out. But fresh salsa is definitely going to be better than something like a queso or something that's cheese-based as well. And kind of going back to the Italian dining, a lot of times that's where we find bread being brought to the table. Same thing with Mexican dining. A lot of times you get chips and salsa brought to the table. If that is something that, you're going out with some people and you're catching up and, food comes and that you start eating more than you think you normally would, I usually ask the other person, do you want this, or would you just rather eat our meal? If they're okay, tell the waiter that you don't even want it to be brought to the table. Or if they do want it, then see if you can have it to their side of the table so that it's not something that is directly in front of you where you can always, reach and grab. So not to say that you can't ever have, that nice warm bread or some chips and salsa, but it is one of those mindless eating type things that oftentimes we're not even hungry once the meal comes because we've been overindulging on that as well. So if you can avoid that altogether, all the better. Going back to ethnic dining then with Mexican foods, fajitas are definitely going to be great, especially if you can add some of those extra veggies in there as well. Again, talking about adding the cheese, same thing with sour cream. If you can eliminate that, you can save yourself a couple hundred calories there. Refried beans are oftentimes cooked in lard. So if you can ask for vegetarian beans, a lot of restaurants will offer vegetarian or vegan beans where they are not fried in lard. So that would be a little bit of a healthier option as well. So when it comes to eating for success, I told you back in the beginning, I was going to show you My Plate. So if you ever want to go on to choosemyplate.gov, there's a lot of different sections you can go to. This is the main thing. Instead of our food guide pyramid, we moved to Choose My Plate. So half of our plate should be fruits and vegetables. Our grains, we want as much as possible to be 100% whole grains. And then our proteins, we want to be lean proteins. And our dairy, again, that's where I said, I don't like that it's off to the side, but our dairy, low-fat options as much as possible. Doesn't necessarily mean that you can't indulge once in a while, but again, everything in moderation. So, knowing that maybe you are going to have something that is going to be a full-fat dairy tonight because it's pizza night, maybe we're incorporating some more fruits and vegetables during the day instead. So kind of planning ahead for whatever meal it may be that you are eating out and keeping that in mind. The dietary guidelines, I kind of just went over all of that when we were looking at Choose My Plate. When it comes to our drinks, I didn't touch on this really, but especially when you were looking at fast food, a lot of times the easiest thing to do is to grab a Coke or whatever it may be. If you can, trying to avoid and just drink water as much as possible. So we're trying to limit any sugary drinks as much as we can. Trying to reduce sodium in all of our foods. So again, any added extra sodium, a lot of our preserved foods, anything that might be prepackaged, those naturally will have a little bit more sodium in there as well. So trying to make as much at home or planning ahead as much as possible can help with all of those. And then eating fewer foods high in solid fats or those saturated fats. So in terms of getting a healthy plate, whether we're looking at My Plate or if we're going out to eat, try not to skip any meals. Again, try and cook at home instead of eating out. Again, I know it's not always possible. That's why we went through all these different options. Plan ahead and pack your lunch. Watch portions. Pay attention to non-hunger cues. So that would be, again, the chips in front of us or continuing to pick at your food because the waiter hasn't come by to see if you were finished yet. Again, minding your method. So putting your fork and knife down in between bites, things like that. And then also watching alcoholic beverages. So the recommendation is for females to have no more than 1 alcoholic beverage a day, for males no more than 2. Beyond that, not only is it calorie dense, if we look at, I'm going to get in a little bit further than I should here, but if we look at our carbohydrates, we have essentially 4 calories per gram. If we look at our fats, we have 9 calories per gram. If we look at alcohol has 7 calories per gram. So we're over what we would with our carbohydrates, and we're not quite as high as our fat, but we're pretty close, being right around 7 when it's 9 calories per gram for fat. We're going to be teetering into a higher category there, especially when you have something with alcohol in it. If you're doing a mixed drink, what else is going into that? Is it going to be, a Coke that now you have extra sugar, or a juice of some sort? And then beyond that, putting any alcohol into the mix can definitely change our idea of satiation. So we may not quite know our hunger cues as well. A lot of times when we add some alcoholic beverages in, let's say you're going to a bar, what does your typical bar fare look like? Most of the time it's going to be foods that are fried and things like that. So it's going to be a little bit harder to find some of those healthier options. So again, just being a little bit more mindful of where we're going, what we're taking in, or what our options are can definitely help in the long run. So then some of our resources that I find very helpful, if you are somebody who needs to dine out often, or wants more help with figuring out how to pack a healthy lunch, Eating on the Run is a great resource, a great book. And then Guide to Healthy Restaurant Eating is another great resource to look at for, again, more of that restaurant style dining. So again, just a last note is to be aware of serving sizes, and that portion sizes are often increased at restaurants. So, if you go to an Italian restaurant and we'll say, your typical serving, maybe you'd have at home is your little bowl that you usually have. And here it's like a platter. Very rarely are we served on a regular plate or bowl. We're usually served platters when we go out to restaurants. So kind of keeping that in mind. And then planning ahead. So look up menus and nutrition information before you go. Does anybody have any questions?
I love that the platter point is, you could get a little small plate to your table too.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Okay. I have a question. What should be your biggest meal of the day?
I think that kind of depends on the person themselves and what their other activities are. Breakfast definitely is considered the most important meal of the day. You are breaking a fast. So by the time you went to bed the night before to the time you wake up in the morning, you have been fasting. So breaking that fast, you can kind of put more fuel into your fire so that you have more burning potential throughout the day to burn more calories overall. And you'll also feel a little bit more energized. So I know there's some people that claim they don't want to eat breakfast and they're going to wait till noon. So that could be a whole other couple hour discussion. But if I had to choose one, I would say breakfast is the most important meal of the day.
Okay. And that's kind of, for me, that's like when you could eat carbs.
Yes, definitely. And carbohydrates are our first fuel. So if you look at your general diet, 45 to 65% of our calories should be coming from carbohydrates. So that is the majority of where we're getting our fuel from. So protein is really there to help with recovery and kind of fix things at the end of the day. So before you go to bed, if you wanted a snack, that'd be a great time to have a handful of nuts or something, because that's going to help with muscle regeneration and recovery as well. Oh,
that's great advice. So protein is more like at the end of the day if you're going to have that bedtime thing.
Yes, definitely.
So your ideal for a lunchtime would be, for me, it's like salad with a lean protein. Is that?
Definitely. Yeah, that would be great. Anytime you can pair carbohydrate and a protein together, that's going to be best, because then we don't have that spike in blood sugar and then that decrease. So protein will help us stay satiated a little bit longer as well as if you're, taking in a carbohydrate through fruits or vegetables or whatever, maybe you have that fiber in there as well. So definitely a great option.
And the other question I had was, it seems like with the fat, with butter and sour cream and cheese, it's a calorie thing just as much as it is a saturated fat point, where it's not just bad for your arteries or whatever, but it's also higher in calorie.
Yes, it is definitely calorie dense. And the bottom line, as we say in dietetics, is calories in versus calories out is weight gain or weight loss. So, every person does kind of burn things a little bit differently, depending on lean body mass, depending on a whole lot of different factors. But essentially, if we looked at calories in versus calories out, that would be where we could see either weight gain, weight loss, or maintenance.
That was a great point when you said, about the calories. It's definitely great when restaurants do list calories now, and it kind of gives you a snapshot. I personally look at menus before going out for with friends or, to restaurants. I oftentimes will be like, I know what I'm ordering when I arrive.
Right.
But it's also like you can figure out sort of, I like the looks of this dish and it has 400 calories. And I like this, like this, but this has 750, but, I'm winning if I do the 400 calorie or whatever, it is actually helpful, I think, for, it'll also help you like judge what the portion size might be or overall the value.
Definitely. Yes. And especially if you're going out with somebody else and all right, we're going to go out to dinner and then we're going to go for ice cream shortly after, you can make a better decision and not feel so bad about grabbing a double scoop of ice cream later if you want it or whatever it is that, you're maybe indulging in more than you normally would. So
that's a great point too. Yeah. I think just being an educated consumer, really helps you in terms of going out for restaurant dining. And I thought your points about brown bagging were great. And like, I just bought a series of sizes for my kids for back to school lunches of containers, that they could use. So they have fresh, clean containers. And it was like, this is the way to go in terms of controlling and also, keeping things contained within your bag. To
right.
have those resealable lids, you can wash them in the dishwasher and everything, but it also helps you kind of gauge really what you're eating.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. And I mean, you can still add a whole lot of variety and a whole lot of, you go away not feeling hungry. I mean, you think there's a lot of food in there when you're really eating well. So yeah.
That's right. Well, once again, a terrific presentation. Thank you very kindly.
Oh, thank you.
All right. Look forward to the next time, Sandy.
All right. Sounds good. Thank you all.
Great. Thanks.